Good afternoon, viewers. My name is Katumba Daniel Isaac, and I'm an assistant lecturer at Victoria University, Kampala, in the Department of International Relations and Diplomatic Studies. And I'm here to welcome you to today's presentation that's going to entail on managing home-related stress. To begin with, stress is not a new phenomenon. It has been here since time immemorial. For as long as human beings have existed, we've been here with the stress factors. And that there are many challenges that make the body disturbed. Some of these challenges tend to be the environment around us, the people around us, and the activities that we normally engage ourselves into. I designed this presentation in 4 categories. 1, I looked at the introductory part of this presentation, where I have to give a background for you to be able to understand the meaning of stress and how it comes to be, some of the types of stress, and then I'll give you the remedial strategies that you can adopt and adapt to be able to overcome stress factors within our vicinity. Of course, the body is an intelligent operating system that, of course, is faced with majorly 2 stressors, and one being life-threatening external threats. Some of these can be either positive or negative. Positive being, maybe you find yourself readying yourself for a new marriage. It can cause you stress. Planning for a pregnancy, it can bring you stress. Maybe also being promoted at work, or even you're seeking to go into your new house that you've built for over years. Then sometimes they can also be negative, whereby you lose a loved one, maybe a sister, a brother, a wife or a husband, or even a divorce. Then the other major category that also is in the same of stressors is the perceived or the imagined stressors that include either thoughts, feelings, nervousness, and all these combined together, they normally cause the body to make a process that eventually produces certain chemicals, where normally adrenaline is produced and the body gets into tension, panic mode, and eventually sometimes your body eventually starts behaving either in a positive manner or a negative manner. Therefore, in this situation where you're faced with either perceived or imagined stressors or life-threatening external threats, you find yourself feeling the stress on the body, where sometimes you feel overwhelmed by the circumstances, you get panic, you find yourself in fear and sorrow. And I want to tell you today, for whatever these stressors are, COVID-19 has become one of the major global stressors that has caused many of us to undergo through trying times. And major these are normally negative situations that have caused us to think otherwise on how we are going to live a life beyond what we see now. Stress is associated with the feelings that people have when they are struggling to cope with the challenges related to finance. Now, many of us, wherever we've been working, we have to agree to the fact that finances have gone down. We have to rethink our budget expenditures. If you've been getting a salary of 1 million, you must now make priorities. Try to cut the expenditures so that you can first survive, because we are not even sure when this pandemic shall end. And COVID-19 has really gotten so much to our finances, how we work. Many of us have been forced to work from home, a new system that has not been actually common to many of us in the way we work. Like some of us who work in universities, we are forced to use the digital learning system. like using Zoom and other programs. But you find that using them also requires some money to buy data, because data is extremely expensive. And also the network is not everywhere. Where some of us stay, network is a problem. However much we're in the metropolitan area, network has become a problem. But what can we do but to just think of going forward? Because without we who are in universities, without students, we cannot survive. And them also without us, they cannot also continue with their education. COVID-19 has also brought about issues to do with breakup relationships, where today, as noticed many times on different media groups, it has caused domestic violence amongst couples. As I said earlier on, that I broke down this lecture into 4 dimensions, looking at now the key terms that every one of you should understand before I dwelt into the main gist of the whole presentation. I first of all wanted to define what is stress, define what is coronavirus, and then get to know what is COVID-19. Because many of you, I'm sure, you may be in position to think of coronavirus and COVID-19 as the same, but one leads to the other. Stress, therefore, can be defined or understood as the body's reaction to any change that requires an adjustment in how you do things and response to how you've been doing things. So in short, it makes you change, where you have to adapt and adopt certain changes in your life. Coronavirus. Coronavirus is a new virus that causes respiratory illness in people and animals and can spread from person to person through either sneezing or even coughing droplets. That's why the government of Uganda has been trying so much to make sure that we all follow the parameters set by the Ministry of Health so that we can avoid the spreading of this disease. Now you find that it's coronavirus that spreads the COVID-19. COVID-19 now is the disease, which of course is a viral one, and that it's also characterized by respiratory illness in people and animals, and can spread from person to person through sneezing and coughing droplets. And thus, such a disease has also got signs and symptoms similar to our common cold or flu. But this one has become extremely gross in terms of killing people because of its queer challenges. The purpose or goal of this lecture is first of all to offer you skills on how you can manage home-generated stress. For those persons not used to being home, but they are forced to stay home because of the current circumstances of COVID-19. The objectives of this lecture, one, first of all, is to provide the sources of home-generated stress, establish the nature of stress that we are faced with around our homes. We shall be able to also find out the types of stress that we go through day by day by being in the lockdown. And then we shall finally be able to offer measures that can be adopted so that we can avert this widespread stress amongst people within Uganda. So let's look at some of the home-generated stress factors that are being surfaced within this COVID time. One, of course, we have to notice that many people around us, colleagues, have been laid off at work. At the time this coronavirus came into play, nobody ever anticipated that actually it would go as far as it has done. But because of the initiation of globalization trends, you find that this disease was able to spread very fast within countries. And its spreading meant that countries had to lock down in and out movement of persons, country to country. Now, the lockdown meaning that we had to stay in our homes. This, of course, has had an impact on companies and organizations, whereby the employees had to remain home, and then the financial burden goes back to the companies, which of course they couldn't sustain. Therefore, laying off some of the workers, causing them stress because they're uncertain whether they will get a job in the near future or otherwise. So such kind of job loss or unemployment would mean that persons who are formerly employed and today they have to wake up going nowhere to work, it's going to cause them stress, which stress of course might actually eventually turn into even suicide. Because many of us, when you wake up and you don't have anywhere to go, you feel challenged, you feel bored, you feel fatigued. But whenever you wake up and go out to work, you're happy, you're going to meet new friends, you're going to meet new colleagues, you're going to meet new opportunities, among others. But once someone loses a job, they become hopeless in life, and that they have to live a life which is based on nothing. Grief and loss is also another cause or source of home-generated stress. Now, where people, in this case, lose their loved ones, yet they would have taken them to hospitals for treatment, but they can't because they're under lockdown. So they are forced to feel the stress on them because their loved one has gone and therefore they had nothing or they had no hand in their treatment because of the current coronavirus. Many of us have got also thoughts, which is also another source of stress at home. Which thoughts, in most cases, are negative because we don't know where the future is of us getting back to the normal. We are living in changing times where we are uncertain of when COVID-19 shall end, and that because of such a circumstance, we live in a situation where we have to get deep thoughts which are negative, and when they are negative, they impact on us, eventually get into a state of hopelessness. Then, the constant environment around us. You all know that, you see, being in an environment which is never changing, it causes humans to feel stressed, especially the men and the young boys. Men actually are people who love moving out. They're always in the search of new things. Those ones that actually, my friends, the Muslims, who are used to having their different spouses visited, they are now forced to be with one who eventually is ever on and off in terms of emotions, and that they can't access their other spouses. This causes them to feel stressed. Even the animals feel the same in case they're in one environment. For example, if you have a dog which is in the fence and it never moves out, the day you take it out, it feels so happy, it's ever jumping here and there. It's the same that happens with humans. That's why many people who have been stressed because of the same environment have found themselves moving out to go and do the jogging, to go out and see other friends around the village where they stay, among others. Then another source is misunderstandings with partners, the increased financial obligations, because here we are where we have to spend but we don't earn. Now, this one questions how we shall live after. Why? Because you find yourself not being sure whether you live the rest of the coming time because of the heavy burden of the finances on us. Then some actually have come out to cry about the failure to pay rent because none of us is working. Those of us who are in the rent syndrome have found ourselves being challenged by the current times because of not working, but you have to pay the landlord, who also has to feed his own family at the same time. But he's also challenged by his tenants and also his family. Can he forgive the tenants or he forgives his family? So there is a dilemma. But we all need to come together and understand the circumstances under which we are living. And I thank the government of Uganda for coming out to tell the landlords about somewhere waiving these months for paying rent, so that when the situation is down, we can still pay the rent even after. But for now, because nobody is working, we need to see that we maintain a life for now. We need to survive. That's what is happening right now. Then we have emotional problems. Many people, because they're not used to being home, they are depressed. They are ever having anger issues. Women know this better. They are ever quarreling, whereas the men, who are normally the Martians, they are normally into their game of keeping quiet over certain situations. Whereas the women who are from the Venus, who are used to talking, find themselves spitting their anger over the men, and then the men normally get into their caves, eventually causing stress on the men. Our dear viewers, this comes to the end of our first segment of this lecture. But when we come back, we shall deal more into some of the sources of stress that is being faced around homes. Our dear viewers, welcome back from that break. Before we took the break, we were looking at some of the sources of stress. And of course, we are here to continue the discussion on some of the stress factors that have continued to challenge our being home during this COVID-19 pandemic. Manifestation of upsetting events have also gone on the rise, such as death, theft, rape has been so common. Recently, we saw one of the coverages on one of the local media channels where a young man decided to go on to a would-be grandmother and rape this woman. So such kind of behavior comes in because someone has nothing to do. So what they eventually do, they go into dubious activities actually that are detrimental to their own behavior or survival. Violence against one another. Another source is fear and uncertainty. Whenever people become fearful and uncertain of the future, they tend to lose hope. And because of the continuous coverage on the TVs about COVID-19, the numbers increasing, people are very skeptical and uncertain where we shall end with this pandemic. Now, when such keeps on moving on and on, we are forced to lose hope whether things shall ever get back to the normal. Now, another also, being confined at home as if one is a thief, so the home becomes a prison of its own self, where mostly to the men and children become extremely tired and fatigued because men are normally seekers of answers. So they're ever having those questions of why, what, where, who, how. Now, when they are kept at home, such questions cannot be answered. So eventually it causes them to feel fatigued of the same environment, and eventually it causes them to feel the stress being too much on them. I'll look at the second category that we mentioned earlier on, trying to find out the nature of the stress at home during the current lockdown because of COVID-19. Of course, stress is a fact of life that we have lived with since time immemorial, which is why many of us consider it to be part of life. But when such extremes such as disease, catastrophes, and related natural and man-made disasters happen, then the situation becomes stressful, creating nervousness, creating impatience, fear and depression, which may also cause a spiral of psychological breakdown. Now, from a social science discipline, we normally tend to look at psychological breakdowns that eventually lead to loss of hope amongst the people. And today, because of the current COVID-19 that has made many of our lives to change, we have found ourselves masked with uncertainty even from amongst our own leaders that keep telling us things shall be normal. But whenever we see numbers rising of the victims of COVID-19, we get to feel uncertain of the future. Now, whenever you feel uncertain of the future, you feel depressed, you become anxious, and anxiety normally misleads people into crime. So currently, we are locked at home, which is, of course, causing a lot of anxiety about the future of our employment. Those who are in the employment world know that times have changed. Many have been laid off. Many are still going to be laid off. And we don't know even whether our organizations and companies shall ever need services of on-time staff. They might find themselves going on to digital streaming. Now look at today where many companies are using the Zoom app to be able to discuss issues relating to organizational strategies. Personal businesses have been challenged. Feeding has become a problem. If families used to eat a whole kilo of posho and beans, today you must be in a position to downsize. Otherwise, even the food that is going to be given by a government, it can't be enough, of course. But if it's not enough, you must live within the means of what has been provided, because we have to survive. That's the most important thing. If you eat lunch, don't eat supper. Just take a cup of tea and maybe bread and sleep. At least you won't die. At least science has proven that, you see, as humans, we can survive for over a week without even feeding, for as long as you take the water. It's the most important thing today. Education of our children has become challenged. Many of our children are at home. They can't study because they can't have face-to-face interactions with their teachers because of the current situation. But however, thank God, we are finding ways of how to sort them out by using maybe technology and further facilities to be able to reach out to them so that we can still give them the resources they can read. Now, all these kind of ventures, health, families, construction, and other friendly well-beings have been distracted by COVID-19, which of course has caused worry, and as a result, many people are seeming to appeal to the Almighty God now. God has become the last resort to tell our plight. And we just hope that maybe someday, sometime, He'll answer our prayers so that this disease can go away, so that we can live a normal life. Therefore, with this reality in place, homes have become unfriendly to many of us who are used to moving out to go and work. Yet we have to continue staying at home for purposes of keeping our lives safe, secure. But of course, we can't avoid having the fatigue in mind of being in the same environment of the home. But what can we do but continue adhering to the directives given by the government so that we can all remain safe? So with such experience, stress comes from the environment, from the body and the thoughts, and today COVID is to blame. The difficulty faced due to this lockdown situation, where everybody is obliged to stay home in order to stay safe, as everyone is required to stay at home, has obviously left many people feeling fatigued by the boring home environment, which of course, as reported in the media fraternity, has increased domestic violence amongst couples and families. So to continue with, of course, people around the world also are facing the same increasing mental health issues because of COVID-19. And such people are at risk of even going into drug abuses. Employees are facing job losses, job uncertainty, and children among those that are most at risk because of challenges faced by their parents for losing their jobs. So even children become uncertain of whether they will even go back to school because their parents have lost out on the jobs that they had. So among the many global health, economic, and societal disruptions caused by COVID-19 has forced many millions of people to physically isolate themselves. Now, there's nothing as challenging as self-isolation. You become a prisoner of yourself, which of course causes stress on how you've been doing things. Okay? So combine these disruptions with the on coverage by the media about the increasing numbers of COVID-19. You find that it causes more worry and stress on people. And I want to quote one person who said that even though I am able to self-isolate in a safe environment and have access to resources to ensure my well-being, I too have experienced feelings of stress during this time because I cannot even begin to gauge the insurmountable stress being experienced by those without such resources. So if those who have resources are challenged and stressed, what about those who don't have what it takes to survive? So this is a challenge to all of us. So in that regard, I also want to share with you some of the types of stress in homes in Uganda that have been seen during this COVID-19 situations. Of course, the current situation in Uganda and the world at large is clouded in fear and anxiety, characterized by acute stress, episodic acute stress, and chronic stress. And what we're experiencing in Uganda are some of these three types of stresses: acute stress, episodic stress, and chronic stress. I want to begin with acute stress. Acute stress, of course, is usually brief in terms of scope and is caused by reactive thinking. For example, I'm tired of being at home. Acute stress is also composed of negative thoughts that prevail about situations or even events that have recently occurred, like the occurrence of COVID-19, or upcoming situations, or even events or demands in the near future. For example, if you have recently been involved in an argument, you may have acute stress related to negative thoughts that are repetitive about the argument. Imagine talking to someone who is ill-informed about something and they keep arguing, wait, you know what you're telling them, that is true. So it can also cause stress on someone because of over-arguing into something. Acute stress also causes signs and symptoms in the body, the brain, and the emotions. Now, once the body is stressed, then the brain is stressed. It will cause a total breakdown of the whole system, because the body is composed of a structure system that has a brain that functions and makes you think and act differently. But once the body is strained and the brain, then eventually become emotional, which emotions, of course, can be either negative or positive. But most cases, whenever emotions are too negative, the body becomes extremely broken down. And once you break down, it can also lead to death or even going mad. Then two, we shall look at episodic acute stress as the second type of stress. This one, of course, is where people who frequently experience acute stress, and that such people live present with frequent triggers of stress. The individuals here suffer acute stress because they live a life of chaos and crisis. People here are always in a rush and they feel pressured. They take on many responsibilities and usually cannot stay organized with so many time demands. So they cannot concentrate on one aspect that is being assigned to them. They do that, they don't finish it. They do that, they don't finish it. Okay? Some of the examples of this kind of stress include anger. And you know many people have anger issues, especially the women. They easily get triggered. They get emotional. Just like earlier on when I talked about a book that many of you are employed to read in this current time. It's called Men from Mars, Women from Venus. When you read that book, you'll be able to understand the difference and variations between men's character and women's character. Those ones are short-temperedness, impatience, tense. Another example of episodic stress include cognitive distress, which is comprised of attention and concentration. Now, many people around this time, they tend to lose concentration on what they do. There is muscular distress, such as tension, headache, back pain, jaw pain, or even muscle aches. It also includes high blood pressure, rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, heart palpitations, dizziness, migraine headaches, cold hands, or even feet. Such stress leads to pronounced health issues such as high blood pressure and heart disease, and eventually leads to the breakdown of the entire body system. Before we look at the third type of stress, we are going to take a short break, but when we return, we shall be able to discuss more about this type of stress. Stay tuned. Dear viewers, welcome back from the break. Before we took the break, we're looking at the types of stress, where we're looking at acute stress, episodic stress, and lastly, chronic stress. Earlier on, we had looked at the two types of stress, that is acute and episodic, and right now we are going to look at the chronic stress that comes as a result of the two major types of stress earlier on discussed. Chronic stress, of course, is the most prevalent and most harmful type of stress. And if this stress is left untreated over a long stretch of time, it can permanently damage your physical health and depreciate your mental health. For example, long-term poverty, repeated abuse in any form, unemployment, dysfunctional family, poor work environment, substance use or consumption, and even maybe an unhappy marriage, which of course causes the entire body to break down. From that end, we shall go on to look at some of the measures that can be taken to overcome this home-generated stress. One of them that I looked at is stay close to your normal routine. If you've been waking up every Sunday to wash, please maintain the routine as it is. If you've been taking your dog for walking in the evenings, maybe at 4 to 5 p.m., please do the same. For those of us who are used to waking up early as 5 a.m. to go to work, we've kept the same routine just to keep our bodies in the same system. Now, many of us have kept a routine of reading, writing articles and papers. It has kept us moving day in, day out, just to kill the boredom while at home. You can wake up and go to bed around the same time, just to keep the routine. Eat the same meals, shower as normal, and do your daily physical exercises. One thing I've adopted online is that I got an app which of course trains me to do some physical exercises, the jogging, the push-ups. I implore you to also visit Google Play or Apple Store. Download some of these apps that can help you do your physical exercises so that you can better yourselves and better your lives. Secondly, you can do the laundry on specifically fixed days like Sundays as usual. This won't only help you kill the boredom, but it would help you keep yourself busy and at work, just like the other normal days. Thirdly, avoid obsessing over endless coronavirus coverages by the media channels, because the more you watch it, the more you feel uncertain of the future sometimes. Watch it, but avoid this too much coverage. It can help you be able to beat around your game. Focus on yourself and your home. Engaging in one on a number of productive activities per day can lead to a more positive attitude. For example, playing with little ones, engaging in games like chess, cards. Those of you who play Matatu, those who play Ludo, please go on playing it. Those who play hide and seek, play it. One time when I was at home, my young sister was telling me so that we can play basketball. And I told her, you don't know how to play basketball, but I would rather play football. Which, of course, I know many of you can play the football. Engage with people at home. Have stories to talk about so that you can forget about the pandemic. If you have a small garden, you can still go on and do the planting. Around this season, I've been able to plant some trees at home, mango trees, the papaya trees. Just keep myself busy, forget about this whole pandemic thing. You could also start a new quarantine ritual. For example, we have a lot of time during this pandemic time to think about ourselves, reinvent who we are. And one of the things I've done as a person is to make sure that I do more of the readings than I used to do in the past. As I've told you earlier on, you could venture yourself into writing articles, those ones who are in the academic world. Read as many books as possible, make articles, sell them out to the persons that you find legitimate, read them, let them review them, and eventually give feedback. Eventually find yourself growing academically. You could also work with your dog. Make it a point that you work with your dog at least 1 hour a day, for those ones who have got dogs at home. It will help you feel better because the dog is keeping you company. But of course, make sure you work with it before the curfew hours. Otherwise, you find yourself on the bad side of the law. You could as well speak to a crisis counselor within, where she or he will be able to help you as an individual to deal with the lockdown and other consequences of the COVID-19 outbreak. You could as well use technology to communicate with loved ones, workmates, extended family members, and friends. And this way you can actually use Facebook, WhatsApp, Skype, you can use Instagram, among others, or even FaceTime. Then you can as well, those ones who are in schools, universities, please, you can involve yourselves into getting learning resources which are online, be able to read them from home so that they could do the continuous readings and do the assignments going forward. For universities, students, they can do e-learning, i.e. using Google Class, where I'm using much of this. You can use the Zoom and Skype, and you can also use Cisco Webitex app. It can help you be able to get in contact with your students and solve that problem of having the stress on you or the burden on you of not knowing what your students are doing, and they also don't know what you're up to as a university. But keeping them in the know helps us better going forward. Then you can also be able to access real-time training to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, this one can be done by visiting the Ministry of Health website, which has given us guidelines on how we can be able to respond to this pandemic so that none of us gets into getting this disease without knowledge about how to avert it. You could also up your activity level. This is one of the tactics that you can use to feel better. You know, whenever you go out there and do an activity which actually makes you sweat, whenever you sweat, it means your body is emitting, the funny diseases are all coming out. And the moment they come out, you find yourself relaxing and feeling better. In a way, stress will go away. You could as well find yourself practicing rhythmic exercises. For example, walking. I've been walking all the time while at home. You can do the swimming, those who have got swimming pools at home. But don't go to the lake because the water levels have risen up. You might find yourself being eaten by the crocodile because they have also come now to the closer shores of the waters because of the increased rise of the water table. You can do the dancing. You know, those of you who watch NTV, you've seen now they have created dancing platforms on Fridays and Saturdays. You can do the dancing, do much of the talking as you dance with the colleagues at home. You find yourself in a way overcoming this stress that is killing many of us while in the lockdown. You can also have face-to-face interviews or interactions with other humans around you, because if you do, this can trigger hormones that relieve stress when you are feeling disturbed or even self-doubting. You know, whenever you talk to someone, you feel a little better because you've been able to utter it out. Your body feels relieved from the challenges it has been facing, because such a person you talk to, normally they offer you some advice on how you can cope up with life during this COVID-19 or even beyond. Then also you can eat a healthy diet. My advice is that eat some food which is rich, of course, in omega-3 and quite proteins, which of course will be able to calm down your stress levels. The oranges, you can do the fish if you can get it, you know. Then practice relaxation techniques such as yoga, those of you who are good at it. Do meditation, think around the clock of where you are and where you're going beyond COVID-19, because beyond COVID-19 is going to be a challenging time for many of us because of the different challenges that have come up. Do the deep breathing, activate the body's response. When you do all this, you'll be able to make your body feel relaxed and better, and in a way, you decrease the stress levels. We've been challenged by COVID-19 as a whole, and the only way we can avert this animal called stress is by making sure that we avoid issues that make us depressed. When you feel depressed, kindly find time. Talk to any person around you. Find yourself engaging in a sport. Many of us have been in a position where we don't do much of the physical because of work. You find yourself sitting in a chair, day in, day out, from office to car, from car to home, and the same routine, which has been causing a breakdown of our body systems. But because of the time that has been given by COVID-19, because, you know, whenever there's a problem, there's a challenge. I mean, whenever there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. So the opportunity is that use the time to make your body fit enough to outgrow some of the complications that you face. If you're heavy in terms of weight, kindly downsize by doing the joggings. If you're too small, find yourself getting into a balanced diet, which can be able to boost up your body system and be able to outgrow some of the diseases that might be amongst us. Otherwise, I wish to thank you for listening to me, and I wish to tell you all Ugandans, wherever you are, that it's high time we change the way we live life. None of us knew that COVID would be here, but the fact that it's here because of globalization, we have been forced to rethink of how we live a life, because we're living in the new normal life that none of us anticipated. So the best I can tell you is that please learn new methods of living the life. If you've not been saving, please do the saving. Do the mathematics well so that you can be able to survive for now. If you've been building, please think of building. For whatever resources you have, try to make sure that you dance around the corner within the finances you have so that you first survive. Then we shall look at the other activities later on when the lockdown is done. Because none of us knows for sure when this pandemic is going to end. But the only thing we can do is to ask God to protect us and save us from the pandemic going forward. Otherwise, God bless you and wish you well wherever you are.